All right, today we're going to break down the arguments of an analysis that asks a really challenging question, one that gets right to the heart of the U.S. military and why people choose to serve. It's a perspective that tries to untangle this complex web of money, culture, and personal motivation. So let's just dive right in.
So here's the central puzzle the whole article is built around. For generations, right, millions of people from the U.S. working class have served. The author then asks, why? Why would someone willingly and even enthusiastically join an institution that, in this particular view, actually supports a system that often works against their own financial well-being?
And the whole thing really kicks off with this bombshell of a quote from Smedley Butler. I mean, this guy was a highly decorated Marine general back in the day. The article uses his pretty shocking words to frame its entire argument about what role the military plays in a global capitalist system.
Okay, so to get to the bottom of the why behind enlistment, the analysis starts with something really direct, the economic reality for a lot of potential recruits. It basically suggests that for many, this isn't some abstract choice, it's a very practical move when other options just aren't there.
The article uses statistics like this one to paint a picture of just how tough things can be. Think about that for a second. Over 42 million people not always knowing where their next meal is coming from. When you're facing that, or when stable jobs with a decent wage are hard to find, the military, with its promise of a steady paycheck, a place to live, and benefits, starts to look like a really compelling option.
And if we look at the actual data here, you can see how that economic pressure shows up in who's enlisting. The source points out that the military's ranks are disproportionately filled by people from marginalized groups. You see African Americans, for instance, making up 20% of the military, but only 13% of the general population. On the flip side, whites are underrepresented. And that other stat, that in 2008, nearly a third of recruits didn't have a high school diploma, well, that suggests the military becomes a real pathway for folks who have fewer educational or job opportunities right out of the gate.
But numbers only tell part of the story, right? The author also talks to veterans to put a human face on this. And this quote from Colin, a veteran, it just cuts right to the heart of it. The main reasons are often just basic needs, paying for college, getting medical care, or just putting food on the table for your family. It frames joining up less as this big ideological decision and more as a straight-up financial one.
Okay, so economics is a huge piece of the puzzle, but the analysis says it's not the only piece. Let's move to the next layer of the argument, because it suggests that material need alone doesn't explain it. There's also this powerful ideological element that shapes how we all see the world and our role in it.
And to explain this, the article brings in a pretty big idea from an Italian thinker named Antonio Gramsci. It's called cultural hegemony. The basic idea here is that power isn't just about force, it's also about getting people to agree. The dominant ideas in a society, what we think of as success or patriotism or just what's normal, start to feel like plain old common sense, even for people who might not actually benefit from those ideas.
This slide is a really cool way to visualize the feedback loop the text describes. The argument goes like this. The economic system, which they call the base, shapes the superstructure. That's our schools, the media, our culture. That superstructure then pushes out values that support the economic base. And the whole thing just keeps repeating. So it's not a one-way street, it's a powerful cycle where the economy shapes the culture, and the culture in turn makes that economy seem like the only way things could possibly be.
So what does that actually look like in real life? Well, the article gives some concrete examples. It argues that when our culture is all about consuming things, when we worship celebrities, and when our schools focus more on obedience than on critical thinking, all of that helps create people who are less likely to question the way things are.
All right, layer 3. This one is all about the words we use, and it zeroes in on the language used to justify military action. The author's point is that words really, really matter, and a change in official language can show us a huge change in priorities. The analysis points to this really specific moment in time, right after World War II, where the language officially shifted. We went from talking about common defense, a term that's pretty focused on, defending the country from attack, to national security. The article even quotes the Navy secretary at the time who pushed for the word security because it was so broad and comprehensive. And that's the key, right? Security can mean almost anything, which allows for a much, much wider range of military actions than just defense.
So, building on that idea, the source says, look, there are two completely different kinds of security we're talking about here. First, there's lowercase security. That's the stuff that matters to most of us every day, having food, a roof over our heads, clean water, feeling safe. The article calls this social security. Then you have uppercase security, and that's about protecting the property, the privilege, and the interests of the elite. And that, the article says, is what we now call national security.
And here's the real kicker. According to this argument, there's an inverse relationship between the two. The article claims that as we pour more and more money into national security, the military-industrial complex, the social security of regular folks, things like funding for social programs, infrastructure, affordable healthcare, that stuff often gets neglected or even cut.
And this idea isn't coming out of left field. The article makes a point to show that people have been warning about this for a long time. It brings up this super famous quote from President Eisenhower in his farewell address, where he literally warned the whole country about the growing power of the military-industrial complex and how it could completely change our society.
Okay, last but not least, we get to layer 4. And this is where the analysis digs into the powerful emotional and psychological stuff that motivates people, those deep, personal feelings of patriotism and duty to serve.
The argument here is that this feeling of patriotism doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's built up over time, starting when we're kids. Think about it. The daily Pledge of Allegiance, the whole cultural story of American exceptionalism, and then you have blockbuster movies that make military service look like the most heroic and exciting thing a person can do. The author suggests all of this creates a really powerful emotional pull to serve the country.
Now, it's really important to get this next point. The analysis isn't saying patriotism is fake or bad. Not at all. It's looking at how that very real, genuine feeling gets directed. The argument is that these powerful emotions are channeled to encourage obedience to a system that, in this view, mainly benefits the people at the top, often by creating this idea of a common enemy we all have to fight.
So, we've walked through all 4 layers of the argument: the economics, the culture, the language, and the emotion. Let's pull it all together now and see the complete picture that this analysis is painting. It claims each of these pieces plays a very specific role.
This table does a great job of laying it all out. You've got economic hardship as the push factor. It gets people looking for an out. Then cultural hegemony creates the ideological environment where the system just feels normal and right. National security provides the official justification for why we need a huge military. And finally, patriotism acts as that powerful emotional pull factor that inspires people to sign up.
And what you end up with, according to this view, is this huge central paradox that we started with. You have citizens being pushed by economic need and pulled by patriotic love to join an institution that, in this analysis, actually ends up protecting the very system that might be causing their economic problems in the first place.
And that's really the final challenging question the analysis leaves us chewing on. It doesn't pretend to have an easy answer. Instead, it just asks us to think a little deeper about the powerful, often invisible forces that shape our lives, the choices we make, and what it really means to serve.